want to come to the events of September the 2nd in a minute. Before I do that, there is one matter which might be important. Did you accompany the accused on a trip to Turkey?
Yes.
When was that?
In July.
Just after you had started working for him?
Yes, third day I went in, he came in and said, Cheryl, get your passport, we've got to go to Turkey on business.
Yes, and you did?
Yes.
Yes. Now just tell me this, whilst you were in Turkey, did the accused do any business there?
The nearest he got to doing any business was when a carpet dealer in the Grand Bazaar offered to swap me for a carpet.
An offer which he didn't accept?
No.
Robert E. Scard stands indicted on 2 counts of obtaining money by deception. Mrs. Margaret Wilde, a housewife, has given evidence that she was induced to invest £3,000 in Scard's bank on the strength of his representations that in the previous year his group of companies had made profits of £250,000, that he anticipated profits would triple in the forthcoming year, and that he himself was making so much money he didn't know how to spend it. Cheryl Baker, Scard's former secretary, is the second witness for the prosecution.
I see, but how do you know Mr. Scard did no business in Turkey? Presumably you went with him all the time?
Well, I was with him all day from breakfast time. I don't see how he could have done any business. Well, not unless he went out after I'd gone to bed. And that was never before midnight.
I see. Yes, Mr. Parsons?
Thank you, my lord. Now, you were, you say, Miss Baker, employed by the accused from about the middle of July to the 2nd of September, 1974.
Yeah, I was a temp for the first 3 weeks.
Ah, you mean you were employed by a secretarial agency and they hired out your services as a secretary to the accused?
That's right. But he didn't pay the agency bills, so I had to leave them so I could stay on with him.
Yes, I see. Now, just tell me this. Whilst you were working at the accused offices, did his companies appear to be trading profitably?
You must be joking. You had to watch out in the morning when you opened the front door in case the post smothered you.
You mean there was always a very large pile of mail?
Yes.
Might that not have been a sign that the companies were busy?
No way. They were all final demands, high court writs and county court summonses.
Mm-hmm.
So the business correspondence of the companies consisted mainly of letters and communications from creditors?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Now, were there any business files in the office? I mean, apart from files of bills?
Not that I ever saw.
Yeah. Now, let's come to the 2nd of September. Or perhaps let's just start with the previous Friday, August 30th. Did anything particular happen that day?
Yes, Mr. Scard asked me to prepare a summary of all the outstanding debts.
Yes. Did you do that?
Yes, I started on the Friday and I didn't finish till the Monday.
Did anything happen over the weekend?
Yes, Mr. Scard came round on the Sunday night. He said his wife had locked him out and could he stay the night. So I said he could sleep on the sofa.
Yes. Did he say why his wife had locked him out?
Yes, he said it was because the grocery store wouldn't give her any more credit.
Oh. So you let him stay the night?
Yes.
Yes. And what happened on the Monday morning?
First thing, I got notice to quit the flat.
You got notice to quit your flat?
Yes.
Why, hadn't you paid your rent?
No.
Why not?
Because Mr. Scard hadn't paid any wages.
But none at all?
None. He kept saying there was some money coming in a few days, and it was just a question of hanging on for a bit and making a few sacrifices, then we'd never have to worry about money ever again.
Oh. Well, did you show him your notice to quit?
Yeah, it was all his fault.
What did he say?
Oh, he said something would turn up and we'd pay it off that day. So I said, what if something doesn't turn up? And he said, oh, well, we can always eat the elephant.
Eat the elephant?
Oh, yeah. He was always going on about that. It was something to do with some people that had got so hungry they'd had to eat this circus elephant.
Ah.
The siege of Paris, Mr. Parsons. Franco-Prussian War, 1871, you know. The elephant from the zoo. They ate it after everything else had been consumed, including the rats.
Yes. What a blessing it is, my lord, that your lordship is here to make sense of all this for us.
No, Mr. Parsons, come. That's an interesting little morsel of history.
I'm obliged to your lordship. So, then, did you both go to the office?
No, we didn't. No, not as simple as that. No, the car ran out of petrol and I had to pay for some more.
I thought you had no money.
Oh, well, my mum had given me £5 on the Saturday.
Ah.
So you gave Mr. Scard some money and he went off to get a can of petrol?
No way. I went and got the petrol. He sat in the car. He said he was expecting an important telephone call from New York.
There was a telephone in the car?
Oh, yes.
Why did you pay for the petrol?
Well, he said he didn't have any money on him.
Ah. But eventually you got to work.
Yes.
And what happened there?
Well, there was a letter from the electricity board saying that because the bill hadn't been paid, they were coming that day to cut the electricity off.
No. Did you show that to the accused?
Yes, and I asked him whether I should pay it.
And what did he say?
With what shall we pay it, dear Cheryl, dear Cheryl? With what shall we pay it, dear Cheryl, with what? So I asked him what I should do. He said to query the bill, and we'd already done that. So we said, well, send them a post-dated cheque. And we'd already done that.
So what did you do with the electricity bill?
Nothing. He said perhaps the man had fallen and break his leg.
Well, can you remember any other letters you had that morning?
Yes, there was one from the HP company about taking the car back. And the telephone people said they were going to cut the telephone off. He got a bit agitated about that.
Yes. And what did he say?
Oh, something about what more did they expect him to do, and hadn't he and his wife made sacrifices enough, and how was he going to manage without a telephone? So then he rang the telephone accounts manager, and he said that he'd sacked the person responsible for not paying the bill, and he'd personally see to it that a cheque was put in the post that day.
Yes, so the telephone accounts manager agreed to postpone cutting off the telephone?
Yes.
Yes. Did you have any telephone calls that morning?
Yes, there was one from Mrs. Wilde. She rang to say she was coming in to get her money back she'd paid for the Bulgarian coach tour.
Oh, so one of Mr. Scard's company was a travel agency?
Yes. Sun Voyager's Personalised Magic, it was called.
Ah. What did you tell him about that?
Yes.
What did he say?
Red alert, bandits at 9 o'clock.
What on earth did that mean?
Oh, it was something to do with the Battle of Britain. He was always banging on about that. He used to be a Spitfire pilot, you see.
I see. The expression signified some sort of emergency.
Yes.
Yes, were there any other calls?
There was one from America, I remember.
Before that?
Oh, Mr. Enriquez, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, he phoned to say he was coming in that day to see Mr. Scard about Mrs. Scard's overdraft.
Yes, now, Mr. Henriquez is a bank manager.
Yes.
Yes. What did the accused say when he heard that?
He said he thought he'd scrap his life and start again. He was always saying that.
Yes. Now, did you have any visitors at the offices that morning?
Mrs. Wilde?
Before that?
Oh, the policeman, you mean? About the unpaid fines?
Yes, whose fines?
Mr. Scard's driving offences.
Yes. What did you do about them?
Well, the policeman said he had a warrant to arrest Mr. Scard. I knew he was in the next office, so I phoned through and said, there's a policeman to see Mr. Scard, and was Mr. Scard there? He said he wasn't, and he didn't know when he'd be back, and suggests that the policeman call round at his home.
Ah, so you spoke to Mr. Scard, and Mr. Scard said, Mr. Scard isn't in. I suggest the policeman go to Mr. Scard's home.
That's right.
And did it work?
What?
Well, did the policeman go away?
Oh, yes.
So what happened next?
I finished the figures.
Yes, and what did they show?
There were writs and summonses out for over £12,000.
That seems a large sum for, what, office expenses?
Well, the telephone was £1,000 a quarter. The rent was £4,000 a year, and that never got paid. Then there was telex, office furniture, printing. And he was always making these trips to the Far East on the Never Never.
What, air tickets on credit?
That's right.
I see, yes, Mr. Parsons.
How much of this £12,000 related to the year ending the 31st of July, 1974? Do you remember?
All except a few hundred.
Yes. And how much did Mr. Scard have in the bank accounts of his various companies?
Just over a couple of hundred.
Yes. Did you show that summary to the accused?
Yes.
What did he say?
Crumbs.
Just crumbs?
Yes.
I see. Then what?
Oh, then he asked me to take down some dictation.
Yes, and did you?
Yes.
Yes. May the witness be shown Exhibit 1, please. Now, have you seen that document before, Miss Baker?
Yes, I typed it. That's what he dictated.
Well, let's just examine it, shall we?
May I see a copy, please?
Yes, of course. Mr. Canty, have you a copy of your client?
Yes, my lord. Thank you. It's very kind.
In a difficult year, which has witnessed the crash of many old established names, the group can look on the trading profit of £250,000 with some satisfaction. Now, Miss Baker, from what you could see of the business of the companies, was a trading profit of £250,000?
No. Like I said, there was near enough £12,000 of debts in writs and summonses alone still outstanding from them.
Yes. It is estimated that profits will triple in the forthcoming financial year. Now, as far as you are aware, Miss Baker, were any of the companies doing the sort of business that might induce a profit of £750,000?
All I know is we spent all our time staving off creditors.
Yes. Did you ever see any of the accounts for any of the companies?
No, never.
No. Now, when you typed this document, Miss Baker, did you have a particular conversation with the accused?
Yes. I said as he was doing so nicely and there was a couple of hundred in the bank, perhaps he'd like to write me a cheque for my wages so I could pay the rent.
Yes, and what did he say?
Oh, he said he needed what was in the bank to pay his wife's grocery bill.
Oh. So was it then that you decided to leave his employment?
Yeah, it was the last straw.
What time was there?
About midday.
Yes. Did anything happen before you left?
Yes, Mrs. Wilde came in and I had to go in the office to get my coat.
Yes, was Mrs. Wilde and Mr. Scard talking?
Yes.
Can you remember what they said whilst you were in the office?
Yes, he said, Cheryl, Christopher booked Mrs. Wilde's holiday with a lousy Liechtenstein company that was no good. Tell him he's sacked.
Who was Christopher?
I suppose you might call him an office boy.
Oh. Did he say anything else?
Yes, just before that, he said to her he was making so much money that he didn't know what to do with it.
So on the very same day as all these other events you described to us, he told Mrs. Wilde that he was making so much money he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I began to wonder if I was hearing things.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Baker, you were, of course, until he rejected you, Mr. Scard's mistress.
He only slept with me the once.
On Sunday, the 1st of September.
Yes.
And then both you and he parted on that Monday you've given us so much evidence about, on bad terms, at least on your side.
And wouldn't you? He comes round on a Sunday night and says his wife's locked him out and can he stay the night. It's midnight and it's pouring with rain, so I can't say no. I offer him the sofa, which he accepts. But once Mr. Scard's in the door, the sofa's not good enough for him. He says, oh, he's got a bad back, and would I mind if he just sleeps on the bed, as he's not going to touch an old friend like me. But Mr. Scard never sticks to a word he says. So the next thing is, he says his arm's cold, and would I mind if he just puts it under the bedclothes?
Yes, well, without going into the details, I mean, you're not enamoured with him now, are you? In fact, quite the reverse.
And why not? I don't like his attitude. Oh, I'm very grateful to you, Cheryl, for sheltering me and sleeping with me. But does that mean I have to love you as well? Love should come first.
Quite, Miss Baker. And it's precisely because you feel so indignant about what you conceive to be Mr. Scard's misbehaviour that you have allowed yourself to give such a false impression of his affairs here today.
What's false?
Well, for example, your evidence was calculated to show that my client, Mr. Scard, was not doing any business. But the truth of the matter is that he was doing a great deal of business, was he not? Mainly over the telephone.
If you ask me whether he was always on the telephone, the answer's yes.
Yes, then for another thing, you made him out to be penniless. But he took you to Istanbul for a fortnight, did he not, Miss Baker?
I wouldn't mind betting that was all on his American Express card, but I had to pay whenever anything had to be done in cash.
But in fact, you don't know how he paid, do you?
No, I don't.
No. He gave you a fur coat.
That was all part of the softening up. He was planning to get me into bed all along.
But he gave it to you, Miss Baker.
Yes.
He paid for you and your mother to go to London to have your hair done at Vidal Sassoon's.
No.
Well, did not you and your mother go to Vidal Sassoon's in London?
Yes, we did.
And neither you nor she had to pay.
The hairdos were a prize he won in a raffle at a charity dance.
Ah, yes, that's what he said initially, to disguise his generosity. But later you learned, did you not, that he had in fact paid for that hairdo out of his own pocket.
Oh, yeah, that's what he said when he was in my flat, but that was all part of the softening up.
You have no means of knowing, have you, that that is not the truth?
How am I supposed to know when he says so many different things?
Mr. Canty, will you in due course be producing a cheque or a receipt or some evidence of that kind to show that your client did pay for these ladies to have their hair done out of his own pocket?
If I may take instructions on that point, my lord.
Of course.
I'm afraid not, my lord. This was all, of course, quite a long time ago, and it was not the kind of transaction that one would normally bother to keep a record of.
Ah.
Now, Miss Baker, Mr. Scard also owned and drove a Rolls-Royce, did he not?
That was on HP.
How do you know?
It was the one we got the letter about.
Oh, no, I'm afraid not, Miss Baker, I'm afraid not. That letter related to my client's wife's car. Perhaps you didn't look at the hire purchase agreement to which the letter related?
No, I didn't.
No. And tell me, while you were working with the Scar group of companies, was a judgment ever executed? I mean, were any of the services, electricity, telephone, telex, were they ever cut off?
No.
No. In fact, Miss Baker, you have no way of knowing, have you, whether my client's companies were genuinely penniless, or whether he was simply mean, or that he was deliberately delaying payments as long as possible as a matter of commercial practice.
What is your full name?
Nigel James Henriques.
And where do you live?
The Thickets, Apsley, Fulchester.
And you're a bank manager, Mr. Henriques?
Yes, in Fulchester.
Now, is it right that you and your wife met the accused, Robert Scard, and his wife at about the beginning of 1974?
Yes, we met at a cocktail party given by the prospective Tory candidate.
Yes. How was the accused introduced to you?
A banker too, Fulchester's answer to Britain's economic crisis.
Yes. And did the accused dissent from that introduction?
Dissent? No, he said he'd be moving into Europe soon.
Didn't it seem odd to you that a merchant banker of substance should choose to set up in Fulchester?
I did ask, my lord. He said that the city boardrooms were full of winos.
Winos?
A colloquial term, my lord, for those down and outs who live about the streets in a perpetual state of drunkenness.
Oh. He was suggesting the men in the city who direct the nation's trade and commerce live in a perpetual state of drunkenness.
Yes, my lord. He said they get to work at 11, they go to the pub at 12, they get back from lunch at 4, and then sleep until it's time to go home at 5:30.
The implication was that he felt out of place in the city.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I see. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Parsons.
My lord. And thereafter, did you continue to meet socially?
Yes, we did.
Yes. And subsequently, did Mrs. Scard open an account at your bank?
Yes.
Yes. And on September the 2nd, 1974, did you visit the accused in relation to that account?
Yes. Elizabeth was always, Mrs. Scard, was always overdrawn.
Yes. And did you discuss this and move on to other topics?
Yes. I asked about business, and he said, and these are his exact words, "We don't seem to be in the draft like everyone else. I guess it's a question of sufficient diversification." He said that he personally was making so much money he didn't know how to spend it.
May the witness be shown Exhibit 1, please. Now, have you ever seen this document before, Mr. Henriques?
Oh, yes, he showed it to me that day. He said they were thinking of introducing new equity-linked deposit accounts.
Yes. And did you ask him about them?
Yes, I asked him what return one might expect, and he said, "Oh, we think it might be as much as 25%.
Yes. And as a result of what you learned, did you consider making an investment in his bank?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Now, Mr. Henriques, was anything else said that day?
No.
No. So what was the next thing that happened in this connection?
On September the 5th, I received a box of cigars from him with a letter.
Yes. May be shown Exhibit 2, please. Is this the letter, Mr. Henriques?
Oh, yes.
Members of the jury, it's in your bundle marked Document 2. Could you read it for us, Mr. Henriques, please?
Yes. Dear Nigel, please accept the cigars as a token of my regret over Lizzie's bloody mindedness about money. I have actioned her into selling some shares. Let me take the opportunity to tell you the good news. Since I spoke to you, affairs have taken another turn for the better. The Shire of Persia has appointed the group purchasing agents on the basis that we receive 0.25% on all purchases. We anticipate commissions for a vast range of goods, the first one for machine tools and military equipment soon. Yours, Robert E. Scott.
Yes, thank you. Now, what was the next event?
The following day, September the 6th, he deposited £25,000 at the bank.
At your bank?
Yes.
Yes. And did you do anything?
Yes. A few days later, on September the 9th, I sent him a cheque for £7,000 as an investment in his so-called bank.
Yes, that was your own money.
Yes, my wife's and mine.
Yes. Now, what had decided you to make this investment?
What he'd stated and what is in those exhibits.
Yes, you believed all these statements to be true.
Yes, I did.
Yes. And what happened next?
On September the 15th, he closed his deposit account with us.
Yes, how was the money deposited repaid?
By banker's draft.
How much?
The computer made a mistake. The draft was for £30,000. It was £5,000 in error.
Ah, so the Scard Bank received £5,000 belonging to your bank by mistake.
Yes. I telephoned him about it when I discovered the mistake a few days later. He promised to have it repaid.
Yes, was it repaid?
No.
Did you speak to him about it again?
Frequently.
And what was his reaction?
Well, he's very apologetic to begin with. He said he'd given orders for it to be repaid, that he'd take it up with accounts. He said someone had been ill.
I see. Now, did you do something else in November in relation to Mr. Scard's bank?
Yes. I had to go to head office. And whilst in London, I called at Company's House and searched the register for Robert E. Scard Banking Limited.
Yes, and what did you find?
No annual returns had ever been made.
Yes. And yet, as we've seen in Exhibit 1, the accused claimed the group had made a profit of £250,000 in 1974, the bulk of that coming from the banking division.
Yes.
So what did you do next in relation to this matter?
On November the 15th, I called again at his offices. I told him that I'd been to Company's House and that there was no annual return for 1974.
Yes. And what did he say?
He had one of those intercoms on his desk. He switched a switch, and he appeared to speak over the intercom.
Why do you say appeared?
Because I do not know whether there was anyone at the other end.
I see. Well, what did he say over, or to the intercom?
He said, "Scard here, tell the company secretary he's sacked. He hasn't been doing his job."
Was there any reply to that?
No.
Then what happened next?
I asked to see the accounts for 1974.
Did he show them to you?
No. He said, "Come on now, Nige." My name is Nigel. "You're not even a shareholder. You know I can't go showing the accounts around. I said they should be in Company's House where anybody could see them."
Isn't he?
He said, "Agreed, Nige, agreed, but what can I do if the dumb shit company secretary doesn't do his job?"
So were you angry?
Yes.
Yes. So then what?
I said I wanted to withdraw my deposit. He said I'd have to give 6 months' notice. He said that was on the document I'd signed when I made the deposit.
And was it?
Yes. I hadn't read it properly. I thought I was dealing with a friend. I said if he didn't pay it back in 7 days, he'd be sorry.
Did you say why?
No. He said, "Oh, come on now, Nige. Calm down before you say something you'll regret. You know I can't go handing back deposits in breach of the agreed terms." I asked him what he'd done with the money.
Did he say?
He said, "Now let's see, Nige. Ah, yes, that went as part of a loan to the Bakir Dolmuş cooperative in Istanbul." I asked him what security he'd taken.
And what security had he taken? Did he say?
The word of a Turkish gentleman. I said he'd got no right to go around risking people's money in that way.
Did he reply to that?
Yes. He called me a mental pygmy.
The jury in this case is comprised of members of the general public. The Queen against Scard will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court. Robert E. Scard has been charged with fraud. At his trial, his former secretary has given evidence that whilst she was working for him, his companies appeared penniless and that they spent the whole time staving off creditors. Nigel Henriquez has related how he invested some £7,000 in Scard's bank as a result of being told that in the previous year, Scard's group of companies had made a profit of £250,000. The profits were forecast to triple in the forthcoming year, that the group had been appointed purchasing agents for the Shah of Persia, and that Scard himself was making so much money that he didn't know how to spend it. All these representations are alleged by the prosecution to have been untrue. Henriquez is still giving his evidence in chief.
He called me a mental pygmy. He said the trouble with this country was that the adventurers who'd made it great had been replaced by what he called snivellers like me, bank managers, civil servants and the like. People who were too cowardly to make anything out of life themselves, he said.
What did you say?
Nothing, I walked out.
Mr. Henriques, you have a remarkable memory, if I may say so. If you can remember the very words that Mr. Scard used after all this time.
I do have a naturally good memory for these things, my lord, and I have thought a great deal about all this in the past few months.
I see. Yes. Yes, Mr. Parsons.
Did you subsequently take any other steps in connection with this Turkish loan?
Yes, I took my Christmas holiday in Istanbul.
What, specifically to make inquiries about this company that Mr. Scard had recommended? What's it called? The Bakir Dolmuş Company?
Yes, my lord. My wife and I had planned a skiing holiday. It was something we'd always wanted to do, but we felt that this was more important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what did you discover?
That a dolmuş is a kind of communal taxi.
Yes. But you did visit the address that Mr. Scott had given you.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No one there had ever heard of the Bakir Dolmuş Cooperative.
What was the address Mr. Scott gave you?
Well, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled K-A-P-A-L-I-C-A-R-S-I.
Well, if you don't mind, perhaps I can assist. It's pronounced Kapalajarsi Kadisi.
Thank you, Mr. Scard. And I'd be obliged if you refrain from speaking unless you're spoken to.
Oh, that's right. No, I was only trying to be helpful, my lord.
You'll assist best by saying nothing until the appropriate time. Yes, Mr. Parsons?
Thank you, my lord. Did Mr. Scott tell you what building in the street was occupied by this company?
Oh, yes, 106.
Yes, but no one there had heard of the Bakir Dolmuş Cooperative.
No.
No. So what other steps did you take?
On behalf of my bank, I instigated legal proceedings for the return of the £5,000 overpaid in error.
Yes. And was a judgment for that obtained on May the 10th, 1975?
Yes.
Yes. Now, after that, did you have any further communication with the accused?
Yes. On May the 15th, I phoned up and asked for the return of my deposit since the 6 months' notice had expired.
Yes. What did he say?
He said I wouldn't get it. He said the money was somewhere, no one could get at it.
You say he said the money was somewhere, no one could get at it?
Yes.
Oh. Now, I believe I'm right in saying that the judgment against the accused bank was not satisfied and that the bank was put into liquidation.
Yes. On May 20th.
Yes, and did you act in close cooperation with the official liquidator?
Yes, I did.
And did you visit the accused premises and take charge of his banking records?
Yes.
Yes. May the witness be shown Exhibit 3, please. Now, does this bundle contain the documents you found at the bank premises, Mr. Henriques?
Yes. We found very little apart from a few bank statements.
Yes, and what do these bank statements show?
But on May the 15th, the date on which I telephoned the accused about the return of my deposit, his bank's only asset was a 15-pence credit on a deposit account with the National Westminster Bank.
Yes. Did you find any accounts for the year ending July 1974, the year you were informed the group had made a profit of £250,000?
No. It appeared that in 1974 about £5,000 had passed through the bank's accounts. At the end of that year there were debts of about £12,000. These had been paid off after the end of the year.
Yes. But do these accounts also show, however, that in November 1974, the accused bank did in fact have on deposit at various other banks some £200,000 belonging to yourself and other depositors?
Yes.
Yes. And what else do these statements show?
That in December, all that money had been withdrawn.
Yes. Could you ascertain where that £200,000 had gone?
No, it's vanished.
Did you find any records of any business from which profits of £750,000 might be made?
We found no trace of any business dealings at all.
So the picture shown by the available records is of some £200,000 accumulated by the bank from various depositors like yourself. And the £200,000 vanished, and there was no evidence of any trading or profits at all.
Exactly, my lord.
Leaving no assets whatsoever?
For 15 pence, my lord.
Yes, did you find any evidence that the accused or any member of his companies had ever been appointed agent or acted as agent for the Persian government?
None whatever.
No. Thank you, Mr. Henriques. Wait there, will you?
When Mr. Scott told you on the 2nd of September that he was making so much money that he didn't know how to spend it, did you make any comment at all?
No.
But at that time, his wife's account was already £1,000 overdrawn for 3 months, and you had already spoken to him about that.
Yes.
Hadn't you? Yes, yes. And when you went to his office on the 2nd of September, it was it not, yet again to speak to him about his wife's overdraft?
Yes.
And you were saying that he claimed to be making so much money that he didn't know how to spend it, and that you said nothing. I mean, did you say nothing to him about his wife's overdraft? Did you not say, for example, how come if you're making so much money that you don't pay off your wife's overdraft?
Mr. Scott can be extremely charming. The first time I spoke to him, he said he was sorry his wife had been giving me so much trouble, he'd get her to sell some shares and pay it off. When I spoke to him about it on the 2nd of September, his attitude was, oh, hasn't she done it? Women are the devil, Nige, women are the devil.
So at the time you deposited your £7,000 with the accused bank, you believed he was a man of substance?
Yes, I did, my lord.
Yes, I see.
Come now, Mr. Henrique, is this claim of yours and Mrs. Wilde? Mr. Scott told you that he was making so much money that he didn't know how to spend it. That was something you cooked up together, wasn't it?
That's what he said. Those are his exact words.
The truth is it not, Mr. Henrique, that Mr. Scott told you that his investments were unconventional, but that big profits could only be gleaned in high-risk areas?
High-risk areas? Most decidedly not.
And yet you, out of a desire for a quick profit, decided to go ahead. Tell me, Mr. Henriquez, what sound investments did you, a bank manager, expect to give an annual return of 25%?
I don't know, there are some.
Mr. Henriquez, what sound investments do you know of which would give a return of that order?
None.
Exactly. None. Now, you went to my client's office before the liquidator, did you not, with one of his clerks?
Before the liquidator?
Yes. Did you take that opportunity to take away, to destroy, or suppress the bulk of my client's files?
He said that. He'd have to, wouldn't he? There were no records that he'd been doing any business at all. These were complete lies.
Now, Mr. Henriquez, it was you, was it not, who first made a complaint to the police about my client?
Yes, I believe it was, yes.
Yes, and in fact you regard this prosecution, do you not, as being in the nature of a crusade?
You ask me whether I see it as a crusade, a campaign against evil, I suppose. Yes, all right, yes. I want to see justice done.
I see. You were friends once. What are your feelings about him now?
You've asked me what I feel. Pity. I pity him. I feel deeply sorry for his wife. I'm sorry she has to sit through all this.
Pity? You loathe him, don't you?
Loathe him? No. No, I feel pity for him.
Pity? But he had an affair with your wife, did he not?
No, he did not. He said that. He said that in a scurrilous letter he wrote in November after I'd returned one of his wife's checks. It is a scurrilous lie.
I see. So you don't believe that your wife had an affair with my client?
She did not. She's sitting there. You ask her. I tell you she did not.
But you have been, shall I say, outraged by a letter he sent to you. Do you, by the way, still have that letter?
Most certainly not. It was the most scurrilous thing I'd ever read. He said she should have psychiatric treatment.
Details, Mr. Henriquez. Just tell us.
No. Let him say what it said if he wants to, since you've asked about it.
Very well, my lord.
He said he was writing out of concern for her. He said I should see to it she had psychiatric treatment. He said they'd gone to bed together and she hadn't been able to go through with it with him or me because she was in love with another man, a man who was over 70.
And all that is untrue?
It is obscenely untrue.
And you still say that your only feeling for my client is one of pity?
Pity? Most decidedly. He's the one in need of psychiatric help.
Robert E. Scard. What does the E stand for, Mr. Scard?
It doesn't, my lord. I myself inserted it to give the name a little more balance. You know. Self-presentation is very important, especially if you're working in the US. But you can leave it out if it's any trouble.
No, 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 no. You style yourself Robert E. Scard. That's the name that will go on the record. Yes, Mr. Canty?
Oh, thank you, my lord. Just tell me this, Mr. Scott. Have you ever been convicted of any criminal offence, that is, other than a motoring offence?
No, sir, no way.
Right, well, let's come straight away to the evidence of Mrs. Wilde and Mr. Henriquez. You did show them this document, that is Exhibit 1, the annual report for your group of companies for the year ending the 31st of July, 1974.
Of course we did. Mr. Henriquez and Mrs. Wilde are quite right about that.
We?
Yes, my lord, the bank.
But you were the one who actually handed the document over.
Absolutely, my lord, but on behalf of the bank.
Just tell us what you did, will you please, Mr. Scard?
Of course, my lord, of course, I understand. But it's just that legally, you see, it was an agency situation.
Let's take the various statements in this document one by one. In a difficult year which has witnessed the crash of many old established names, the group can look on the trading profit of £250,000 with some satisfaction. Now, firstly, what does or did your group consist of?
Well, if I may say so, with respect, it's a misnomer to call it my group. You know, I was just one of the shareholders and only one of the officers of the various companies concerned. I think it's very important to get that in perspective.
Yes, of course. Now, perhaps you would explain to us how the group was composed.
Yes, well, finance, the bank.
Robert E. Scard Banking Limited.
Yes. Robert E. Scard Resources Limited.
Mineral and other resources?
Yep. Trading, Robert E. Scard Trading Limited. Property, Robert E. Scard Property Limited. Retailing division, Robert E. Scard Retailing Limited.
Were these companies all trading at all times material to these proceedings?
100% correct, yes.
Now, in this document, it is stated that the group made a profit of £250,000 in the year ending the 31st of July, 1974. Was that true?
Absolutely.
Did the companies in the group have auditors?
Yes, Mr. Svensson, of Svensson and Smith, the chartered accountants.
And were details and records of all the activities of the group submitted to Mr. Svensson?
Yes.
And did he prepare the accounts?
Yes.
Did Mr. Svensson prepare a summary of the affairs of the group for the year ending 1974, and do you now produce that summary?
I do.
This will be Exhibit 4?
Yes, my lord.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what profit does that show, if any, Mr. Scard?
£250,000.
Mr. Scard, neither Mr. Henriquez nor the liquidator found any accounts or records in your office at all. And you say they disappeared. Where did that document come from?
Mr. Svensson had kept a copy, my lord.
Uh-huh. And did he keep a copy of other records or accounts of the various companies, for instance?
Well, I understand they all got thrown out by mistake, my lord.
Thrown out?
By someone in his office.
So now there are no documents at all to cast any light on the profits or trading of the companies?
Oh, just a few, my lord.
All the rest lost?
Or suppressed. And I am very severely prejudiced by the loss of these documents from my office. They would prove the truth of everything that I say. And I would like that to go on the record.
This is not an American court, Mr. Scard. And for your information, every single word you say is going on the record.
Good.
Mr. Svensson, is he alive and well and available to give evidence?
Oh, yes.
I see. Yes, Mr. Canty?
It is estimated the profits will triple in the next financial year. Did the group make that profit?
No, but they would have done if Nigel Henriquez hadn't lost his head and put the bank into liquidation when there was this temporary cash flow problem.
Yes. Now, when you gave that document to Mrs. Wilde and Mr. Henriquez, did you yourself personally believe that these profits might be realized?
I most certainly did, yes.
Now, was there one particular deal, Mr. Scard, which...
Yes, I'm very glad you asked me that. We were negotiating a multi-million-pound international loan, and our commission would have been 0.25%, £750,000.
A multi-million-pound loan? Yes. Who's the loan for?
Well, I'm afraid I can't tell you. I didn't know.
What do you mean you didn't know?
Well, don't you understand, my lord? No, of course you wouldn't. You wouldn't have any experience of these things. No, you see, in these transactions, you do not reveal the names of your clients until the deal is concluded. Otherwise, you'd be cut out quicker than you could say knife.
You mean you were acting for agents of undisclosed principals?
We were. Agents. Brokers.
I see. Yes, Mr. Canty?
Perhaps you could explain, Mr. Scard, how you became involved in these negotiations?
Well, we'd reason to believe that an American broker had clients who could make available very large sums of money indeed, if we could place them properly. And we also reason to believe that a broker with whom we had contacts in Hong Kong could place these very large sums. So we tried to get it all together.
But in the end, the deal never went through.
Well, you see, you must understand that sums in excess of, even as little as 10 million are very sensitive sums to place. The terms have got to be just right for the lender. And it doesn't take very much to knock the whole edifice to pieces. That's where our 0.25% comes in, you see, for fixing it. Well, in this case, we did get it all together, but it all fell apart afterwards.
There were binding contracts then?
Oh, absolutely.
So now I suppose there are various legal proceedings afoot for breach of contract in connection with this international loan.
Oh, indeed. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it is the subject of lawsuits in half a dozen American states.
No, I see. Tell me, how are these negotiations carried out?
A telephone, and by telex.
And all the telexes, of course, have been lost.
Or deliberately destroyed.
Now, Mr. Scott, we know that in November 1974, your bank had on deposit at various other banks a sum of £200,000, but that in the following May, that would be May 1975, there was only a credit balance in those accounts of 15 pence. Now, where did that money go?
Well, you'll appreciate that I am in difficulty here speaking without the records. I mean, I may get it wrong.
Just tell us to the best of your recollection. You do nothing wrong if you make a mistake, only if you tell a lie.
Right, well, £100,000 was loaned to a company in Istanbul at 20%.
Has that been repaid?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So it's still owing?
Correct.
Yes, Mr. Scott?
And £100,000 was transferred to the trading division.
A loan to Robert E. Scott Trading Limited.
Right.
Still repayable?
Oh, legally repayable, yes.
So there's no question of you having stolen that money.
Now, all those funds were properly dispersed in legitimate investments according to the scope of the legal objects of the bank, and all are repayable.
Now, all the prosecution witnesses have said that on September the 2nd, you told them that you were making so much money that you didn't know how to spend it. Now, did you say that?
No way. I'm not that sort of a loudmouth, for one thing. No, that's something that they have cooked up together.
Miss Baker also said that while she was working for you, you spent your entire time staving off creditors. And as far as she could see, there were never any profits at all.
Oh, well, that's Terrell again, you see, talking out of turn about things about which she knew nothing. At that time, I had a multi-million-pound international loan. She hadn't even heard of it.
Now, Mr. Henrique says that when he telephoned you on the 15th of May and asked you for the return of his £7,000, you told him he wasn't getting it, and that the money was somewhere where he couldn't get his hands on it. Now, did you say that?
No way.
So he's either mistaken, or he is in fact lying.
Right. But I'd like to say that Mr. Henriquez has been under considerable strain. His wife...
Yes, Mr. Sir, what was your relationship with his wife?
Well, I was having an affair with her. I didn't want it, but these things happened to me.
Now, Mr. Henriquez came to see you on the 15th of November 1974. He told us of what must have been a fairly long interview, in which he asked to see the bank's books and demanded repayment of his £7,000. Now, he says he was angry at that interview.
Right.
Do you know whether he knew at that time about your affair with his wife?
Oh, yes. Oh, I would never have written him that letter if he hadn't already known.
Did he say anything about you and his wife at that interview?
No. More concerned about his money, it seems.
He says that he inquired about the Turkish investments and that you called him a mental pygmy. Is that true?
Well, I don't want to hurt anyone. It's just that, you see, this country was made by a handful of men who were prepared to make decisions and to back those decisions with their lives and their fortunes. I mean, a handful of my generation who fought the Battle of Britain. And over the last 30 years, we've seen the freedom we fought for frittered away, and our great adventurers replaced by an army of grey little men with no horizons wider than their pensions. Well, just for a moment, I couldn't help seeing Nigel for what he really is, a branch bank manager, a grey little man with no horizon.
So you called him a mental pygmy?
Yes.
Did he reply?
Yes. He said, I will destroy you, Scard, if it is the last thing I do.
Oh. Now, exhibit number 2. Did you write that letter to Mr. Henriques stating that the Persian government had appointed the group sole purchasing agents for the United Kingdom?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, Mr. Henriques is quite right about that.
Now, did the Persian government place any business with the group?
No, but they would have done were it not for the bad publicity created by Mr. Henriques.
There was an agreement, was there?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's another of the documents that has disappeared, I suppose.
Oh, no, that was a verbal agreement.
A verbal agreement?
Yes.
With whom? The Shah of Persia?
How could it be? No, His Highness the Shah and I have never met, have we?
Then how was the arrangement made, Mr. Scard?
Over the telephone with Mr. Purvis at the embassy. It was later confirmed by telex.
Did you keep the telex?
Of course. And I would have them today, only somebody is out to get me.
Tell me, who do you think is out to get you?
Well, search me. Nigel Henriques, the liquidator, the police, whoever it was who stripped that office bare of every document that would be useful to my defense.
Your former secretary, Miss Baker, says there were no records at all.
No, well, that's perjury. But I've only myself to blame for that.
Why?
Well, you may find this difficult to believe, but for reasons which I occasionally understand, women do find me extremely attractive, and I'm extremely weak in this matter. When a woman makes her dead set to me, I give in, as Confucius says, without a struggle. You know. Well, I do know my weaknesses, so when Cheryl came round looking for the job, I said, well, I had asked for somebody ugly, you see. So I said to her, are you the lesbian I ordered? And she was a little bit indignant about that, but not being used to my ways. But when she calmed down, I said to her, now look here, Cheryl, I said, do you find me at all attractive? Because if you do, it's no good. We can't work together. Well, she assured me that she found me one of the least attractive men she'd ever met. And quite frankly, I was taken in.
Do come to the point, Mr. Scard.
Oh, was I going on a bit? I'm sorry, my lord.
You wish to explain that for some reason Miss Baker bears you a sense of malice, and that has led her to tell lies about you.
Well, I mean, in no time at all, she's voluntarily staying on late at the office, and, you know, one thing leads to another, and to another, and to another, the way these things do. And she's getting heavier and heavier and heavier.
You mean serious?
Oh, dead right, my lord. Well, I mean, I'm a married man. I love my wife and my children sincerely and deeply. And, I mean, this extramarital heaviness is not for me, and she knew that. I mean, don't get me wrong. So, I mean, it all ended up in blood and tears, I'm sorry to say, with Cheryl vowing to get scarred, like all the rest of them. It's all my own fault. And I should never have believed her when she said that she didn't find me attractive. All women do.
The jury in this case is comprised of members of the general public. The Queen against Scard will be concluded tomorrow in the Crown Court. Robert E. Scard is charged with fraud. It is alleged that he obtained £7,000 from a Mr. Nigel Henriques and £3,000 from a Mrs. Margaret Wilde by making false representations as to the financial standing of his companies. It is further alleged that he misappropriated £200,000 invested in his bank by Mr. Henriques, Mrs. Wilde and other depositors like them. He's given evidence denying these allegations. At the Fulchester Crown Court, Mr. Parsons, counsel for the Crown, rises to cross-examine Scard.
Mr. Scard, what you've told us so far is humbug from beginning to end, is it not?
No, sir.
Come now, I mean, you're no more a former Spitfire pilot than I am.
I never said I was.
Well, that's what you told us yesterday.
I did not. And don't you try and twist it.
Well, you certainly said something from which that might be inferred.
Well, if it was misleading, it was accidental, and I'm sorry, my lord.
You told Miss Baker you were a Spitfire pilot?
I was an aircraft fitter during the Battle of Britain, and I have never told anyone anything different.
Well, we hear what you say. Now, I'm going to take this step by step. The £250,000 group profit. Now, first of all, at no time in 1974 or 1973 were there more than 3 people working for your group. Is that right?
That's right, yes. 2 most of the time, myself and a temp. And I had a boy, the one I sacked over Mrs. Wilde's Bulgarian holiday.
Yes. We're just trying to get your group into perspective, Mr. Scott. Do you understand?
Yes, I think that's very important, if I may say so.
Good, good. Now, Robert E. Scard Retailing Limited, the retailing division of your group, didn't make a £250,000 profit in 1974, did it?
No.
No, because its only retailing outlet was a single newsagent shop in a village, wasn't it?
Small beginnings, yes.
Mm-hmm. The property division, Robert E. Scard Property Limited, that didn't make a £250,000 profit in 1974, did it?
How would you know?
Never mind how he'd know. Answer the question.
Oh, sorry. Can I have it again?
The property division didn't make any profit at all, did it?
No, well, we were tricked, you see, over some land we bought for redevelopment which had an open space zoning on it. Something which our surveyor didn't bother to tell us. As unknown to us, the vendor was his brother-in-law. We're suing him.
Ah. Robert E. Scard Trading Limited, the trading division didn't make any profit, did it?
Well, I'm not quite sure about that.
It didn't make a £250,000 profit, did it?
No, no.
Yeah.
How much did it make?
Well, I'm trying to remember. You see, I'm stuck without the records.
Take your time. We can wait.
Well, I think we just about broke even.
Ah. The resources division, Robert E. Scard Resources Limited, didn't do any business at all, did it?
Oh, yes, we negotiated for a bit of the action in the North Sea, but we didn't get it, no.
No, no. The travel agency, Sun Voyager's Personalised Magic. That didn't make any profit, did it?
No, Sun Voyager's Personalised Magic was a whole lesson against delegation. Take my advice, Mr. Parsons.
Yes.
Never delegate.
So the £250,000 profit must have come from the banking division.
Right.
Right, so now you tell us. How did you make it?
Financial consultancy.
What, fees for advice?
Right.
When were they paid?
They weren't.
How on earth did they get onto the accounts as a profit if they were never paid?
Oh, what's wrong with that?
It was just a debt.
Yes. Mr. Svensson said it was all right. I mean, I'm not an accountant. I just give him the papers and leave it to him to work it out.
Well, is Mr. Svensson in court today?
I don't know.
Has he been subpoenaed?
Well, I'm afraid you'll have to ask my solicitor about that.
You say you don't know whether he's coming to court?
I don't believe he is.
So then we'll only have your word for it, that, in fact, that Mr. Svensson approved these accounts.
Well, if it's wrong, as you are saying it is, I suppose he'd be frightened to come into court and face the music, wouldn't he?
You can subpoena him, you know. Force him to come.
Oh, yes.
Yes, well, then, have you decided whether to subpoena him?
Really, my lord, I must intervene. The decision whether or not to subpoena a witness is one especially to be taken in conjunction with legal advisers. However, my lord, to clear the matter up once and for all, I will not be calling Mr. Svensson.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Canty. That is most helpful. Shall we move on, Mr. Parsons?
Very well, my lord. Just tell me this, Mr. Scard. How did you earn these fees of £250,000 that were never paid? Whom did you advise?
Well, we completely reorganized the financial structure and the cost systems for a client.
Yes. The name?
Stoker and Tyler, here in Fulchester.
Mr. Scard, Stoker and Tyler is a small firm of builders. It's a private company employing 5 men. Are you saying that you gave them advice worth £250,000?
It was worth much more than that. That's what I charged.
Mr. Scott, that's incredible. I mean, the turnover of that company could only be about £50,000, couldn't it?
25,000, if my memory serves me right.
And what did you do for them for £250,000?
I've just told you. Look, if you don't believe me, why don't you look at the agreement? My solicitor's got it there.
Yes, it is. It is here, my lord.
Let Mr. Parsons see it, will you?
Very well, my lord.
Let's see. Yes. Thank you. I see. Well, yes. This does indeed appear to be an agreement signed by them for your services. And goodness knows what induced them to sign this. I mean, they haven't made a million since receiving the benefit of your advice.
Well, I'm afraid you'll have to ask them that. I wouldn't know.
Haven't you heard, Mr. Scott? Haven't you heard? Stucker and Tyler went bust at the beginning of the year. They're in liquidation. Did you honestly believe that at any time they would be capable of paying you £250,000?
Well, I mean, what is a man to do when his professional advisor comes to him and says, you have made £250,000 profit? What, tell him he's a liar? I mean, what are accountants for?
This document had better be marked Exhibit 5.
Yes, my lord. Well, shall we next deal with the Shah of Persia?
Fire away. Anything at all. You ask him, I'll answer him. Fire away.
Now, the appointment was made by Mr. Parvers, you say, from the embassy.
Yes, over the telephone.
And by telex, you told us.
Well, how did you ever get this appointment? I mean, did he just phone you up out of the blue and say, Mr. Scard, I've heard about you. Would you like to act as the Shah's agent?
Very good, my lord. Very good. No, seriously. No, I met him in Tehran some years back.
Where?
In a club.
Called?
The Keyhole Club. It's in Shemiran. That's the smart bit where the royal family have their palaces.
And were there discussions about the proposed agency then?
Oh, no, he was much more interested in the Broads.
The Broads?
Oh, sorry. Ladies.
Oh.
No, seriously. Later he was seconded to London, and we had many top-level discussions then.
So you became quite good friends?
Oh, yes, yes. We used to go round the clubs together.
What would you prefer to say? You became very close friends?
Oh, yes, he used to always call me up when he wanted some fun.
So no doubt this very close friend will be coming to give evidence to corroborate your story.
Oh, yes, he'll be here all right.
Is he in court today?
Well, no, you see, the snag is that he is no longer with the embassy in London.
He was recalled?
Yes, to Persia.
But you say he's on his way?
Right.
Very well. Well, let's deal with the missing £200,000. Now, first with the £100,000 you say was loaned to a Turkish company. Is that the one you told Mr. Henriques about, the Bakia Dolmuş Cooperative?
Right.
Which organisation Mr. Henriques tried to visit at the address you gave him and found it not to exist.
Well, that's rubbish. If he'd gone there, he would have found it. It's run by a Mr. Bakir in the old bazaar. I don't believe he ever went there. Or if he did, he certainly didn't look properly. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but that place is amazing.
Again, there is no documentary evidence of this loan.
Well, I'm not responsible for what other people do with my papers, am I?
So again, we only have your word for it, that any such company exists, that that amount of money was put on loan to them, or that you didn't just secrete it away in some bank account.
Well, I've told you. What more can I do?
Well, when did you carry out this business with this Turkish company? It wasn't when you took Miss Baker to Istanbul, was it?
No, but that's when the negotiations started.
Well, I mean, according to her, the nearest you came to doing any business there was when a carpet dealer in the bazaar offered to exchange her for a carpet.
Well, that's not true. And after what she said in this court, I'm beginning to be sorry I didn't agree to the exchange.
Mr. Scard, will you please take these proceedings seriously?
Well, that's very difficult, my lord. When Henriques or the police or the liquidator or somebody has gone off with all my papers and you're prosecuting me and not them.
Don't you realize what a serious position you're in?
I should say I realize it much more clearly than anyone else in this court. And I haven't just got myself to think about. I've got a wife and young children.
My lord, might I have a moment?
Of course.
Yes. Mr. Scard, I'd like to go back to the Persian matter, if I may. You say you met Mr. Parvers in Tehran?
Yes.
Yes, when was that?
Oh, a couple of years ago.
Yes. Would a British citizen require a visa to visit Persia?
I do a great deal of travelling. I can't remember.
Well, they would do, wouldn't they?
Yes, I think you're right.
Yes, well, I wonder if you would look at your passport and find a visa for Persia for me.
Thank you. There isn't one.
Ah, well, there would be one, would there not, if you had been to Persia as you claim?
I think I better scrap my life and begin again, don't you? The visa must be in my old passport.
But that would mean that your visit to Persia must have taken place at least 4 years ago.
Yes, must have been.
But just now you said it was a couple of years ago.
Well, you know, I made a mistake.
So once again, we only have your word for it, that you ever went to Persia. Or that there's a man in the Persian diplomatic service called Mr. Parvis, or that you met him.
Well, you can ask him when he comes.
I await his advent with almost uncontrollable eagerness, Mr. Scard.
My lord, if I may intervene again, my client plainly hasn't heard the latest news. Mr. Parvis will not be attending to give evidence.
But he promised. I was talking to him last night on the telephone.
My lord, the position is quite simple. Mr. Parvis is in Persia, and he is informed by instructing solicitor that he would be unable to come to England in the next 2 years.
Well, then we must have an adjournment.
For 2 years? Mr. Canty, are you applying for an adjournment?
No, my lord.
But why not? I am being deprived of all the evidence for my defense.
You must be guided by your counsel, Mr. Scard.
Oh, so we shan't be hearing from Mr. Parvis either, after all. Now, I wish to come back to the missing £200,000. You've explained how £100,000 went on a loan to a Turkish company, and you say the other £100,000 went on a loan to Robert E. Scard Trading Limited. Now, no documentary evidence of that loan, I suppose.
Oh, what for? I don't write letters to myself, you know.
You're referring to the fact that you are, or were, managing director of both companies?
Yes, of course. You know, I don't waste stamps writing letters to myself. I just do it.
And is there any chance of that money being repaid?
Well, I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future.
Why not?
Well, because we were defrauded.
How?
Well, we had bought some ex-US Army, ex-Vietnam, electrically operated portable flush lavatories, which turned out to be no good.
What happened to them?
Well, it turned out when they reached the buyers, we had sold them on, you see, that they wouldn't flush.
You bought £100,000 worth of portable lavatories, and when they were delivered, you found that they wouldn't flush.
That's right, my lord. There were no outlets from the bowls. It was plain fraud. All they did was give out electrical shocks.
And you're saying that you paid for them?
Oh, yes, as soon as we got the bills of lading.
I thought it was a golden rule of all entrepreneurs never to buy anything until they'd already sold it. Are you saying you broke the golden rule?
Well, it was a very respectable American company incorporated in New York with assets in the UK. I certainly didn't expect it of them.
What was the name of the company?
Resco, New York.
How many lavatories were there in the consignment?
2,000.
What did you do when you discovered you had 2,000 lavatories which wouldn't flush?
Well, my wife and I tried putting outlets in some of them and rewiring them, but it was no good. So we shoved them out in the garden and we issued a writ. But we ended up with a no-good judgment.
Why was the judgment no good?
Because Resco had shifted all their assets out of the UK.
Oh.
Dear, dear, what a chapter of misfortunes you seem to have experienced, Mr. Scard. I mean, if everything you say is true, nothing went right.
Well, you can say that again. And I had a consignment of Levi's, which were illegally seized by the Turkish police as well. That matter's been dealt with by the Foreign Office. And I must say this trial is not helping overly either.
Oh, dear. Thank you. Mr. Scott, you say the company that defrauded you was Resco New York.
That's right.
Resco New York is short for Robert E. Scott and Company, New York, is it not?
Yes.
Another of your companies, an American company.
Yes.
Then why did you tell us that your English company was defrauded by this company when you owned them both?
No, the American company wasn't mine.
You just said it was.
No, I'd sold out at the time of the deal. Oh, no, that company and I were at arm's length. But they kept my name for the prestige and the goodwill.
So there's a contract of the sale of the shares in that company.
Oh, yes, of course. You're going to ask for the documents. No go, I'm afraid. Gone west, like the rest of them.
I see. Just your word once again. Well, can we now come to the forecast profit of £750,000?
Fire away.
This was an anticipated commission for arranging a multi-million-pound international loan.
Yes.
For how much was the loan?
$300 million.
You just made that up.
No, certainly, no.
Then why did you require a calculator to work out what figure would be required to produce £750,000 profit at 0.25%?
Well, I'd forgotten how much the loan was for. All I could remember was the commission figure.
Really? And you say the deal was clinched before the 2nd of September 1974?
Well, so I thought. I'd ordered a new Mercedes already.
But what went wrong?
Well, you see, as I explained to you before, in these transactions, you do not reveal the names of your principals if you don't want to get cut out of the deal, you see. So, I mean, there may be a whole chain of men in the deal. I mean, X may not know a man with the money to lend. He may only know a man who knows a man with the money to lend. Or he may only know a man who knows a man who knows a man with the money to lend. Or even a man who knows a man who knows a man who knows another man with the money to lend.
Yes, Mr. Scard, there's no need to go on. We get the picture.
Yes, well, this deal began when a Dallas broker rang me up and offered me $300 million at 298 and 9%.
298?
Yes, my lord. That's the discount rate, you see. Now, I happen to know a broker in Hong Kong who was looking for money, so we got it all together and it all gelled. But the International Monetary Fund couldn't do it for him, but I did it.
And then what?
Well, then, sometime after that, it was time for us to uncover ourselves, so to speak. And I was in L.A., and I got word that it was time that we'd put it all through, so they all flew in to put the seal on it. And then, pow, the ugly truth revealed itself in all its nakedness. Or rather, vice versa.
You mean that all the brokers met to reveal their principals and seal the contract?
Right.
Well, just tell us what happened.
Well, it turned out that the Dallas broker, who had agreed to lend me the money, didn't have any money. And that he was merely drumming up a bit of the action in the hope that he could borrow it when he had found a borrower.
Ah, you know. But he couldn't find anyone to lend it to him.
Oh, no, he found someone all right.
No. But what went wrong?
Well, when we all uncovered ourselves, it turned out that he had borrowed from a man in Germany, who had borrowed from a man in Tokyo, who had borrowed from a man in Genoa, who had borrowed from a man in Hong Kong, who had borrowed it from me.
You mean you had borrowed £300 million from yourself?
No. Lent it. No, you're right. But you see, I didn't know that when I told Henriquez and Mrs. Wilde about the estimated profit margin. I mean, I thought it was all for real.
Yes. Mr. Scard, are you really saying all this happened to you?
Sure. This could happen to anybody. It happened to me.
Now, the accused denied all these charges. He admitted making the representations of which there was documentary evidence, but said that those representations were true. He denied ever saying that he had so much money he didn't know what to do with it. He claimed that the £200,000 had been dispersed perfectly lawfully. He said that the witnesses were all motivated by malice to tell lies about him. He claimed Mrs. Wilde was his mistress.
Well, I apologize for interrupting, but As far as I can recall, Mr. Scard did not claim to have an affair with Mrs. Wilde.
Didn't he? I thought he claimed to have slept with everybody.
No, my lord, not with Mrs. Wilde, or with Mr. Henriquez.
Oh, very well. Thank you very much, Mr. Parsons. Very helpful. Now, members of the jury, you heard what Mr. Parsons says. He is, of course, quite right. The accused claimed that he slept with Miss Baker and Mr. Henriquez's wife, and that those events were a partial explanation for the malice which he says the witnesses bore him. Well, you must choose between the witnesses. Whose evidence do you find the most credible? Do you believe the accused's complicated explanations? Do you believe they ever were the documents which he claimed existed? Or do you really believe that Mr. Henriquez destroyed or suppressed them? Those are matters for you. Remember that the burden of proof rests upon the prosecution. They must prove the accused guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. If you have any reasonable doubt, then the accused must be acquitted. Now, will you please retire, elect a foreman to speak for you in return, and consider your verdict.
And just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you're all agreed?
Yes.
On the first count, obtaining the sum of £3,000 from Mrs. Margaret Wilde by deception, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
On the second count, obtaining the sum of £7,000 from Mr. Nigel Henriquez by deception, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
And on the third count, theft, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Robert E. Scard was sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment on each charge.